Today, we're going to talk about an event that didn't just shake a community. It shook the entire country and ignited a movement. We're breaking down the 2018 shooting at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School, the tragedy itself, the failures that led to it, and the incredible response that came after. At the very heart of this story is a number that is just impossible to forget. 17. That's 14 students and 3 faculty members who lost their lives on what should have been a totally normal afternoon. And we have to be clear, this wasn't just another horrible headline. The Parkland shooting is, to this day, the deadliest mass shooting at a high school in American history. It became this defining moment, not just for the precious lives it took, but for the powerful wave of activism it unleashed. So to really understand what happened, we need to go back. The date was February 14th, 2018, Valentine's Day. For the students at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High in Parkland, Florida, it was a pretty normal school day, right up until the final minutes before dismissal. Okay, so here are the core facts. The shooter was a 19-year-old former student. He'd actually been expelled for disciplinary reasons. He arrived on campus with an AR-15 style rifle that he had bought legally, and he walked right into the freshman building, known as Building 12. What's so hard to wrap your head around is just how fast this all happened. The entire attack was horrifyingly brief. To get a sense of the devastation, we have to look at the timeline. We're talking about 6 minutes. Just 6 minutes that turned a school into a scene of absolute terror. The speed is just staggering. At 2:21 p.m., he fires the first shots. Now, the sound of the gunfire actually set off the fire alarm, which just added to the chaos and confusion, because students started evacuating their classrooms right into the hallways. The shooter moved methodically, floor by floor, firing into classrooms, and then by 2:27 p.m., it was over. He just dropped his weapon and blended in with the terrified students to escape the building. In those few minutes, he fired 139 rounds. The result? It was catastrophic. 17 people were killed and 18 others were wounded. It was an attack of just unbelievable efficiency and brutality. Now, in the aftermath, as everyone was reeling, this deeply disturbing picture started to come together. This was not some sudden, unpredictable act of violence. Not at all. It was the end result of a long, clear pattern of warning signs that were somehow missed or just ignored by the authorities. I mean, just look at the scale of this failure. There were at least 45 calls to the local sheriff's office over about a decade about the shooter's behavior. The FBI was warned not once, but twice. First about a chilling YouTube comment, and then a really detailed tip was called into their tip line just 5 weeks before the shooting. And this tip is the one that's just so hard to process. The FBI themselves admitted it was incredibly specific. The caller mentioned the shooter's guns, his desire to kill people, his erratic behavior, everything. But because of a breakdown in protocol, that information was never passed on to the Miami field office to be investigated. It was a complete and catastrophic failure. And the failures weren't just before the attack. The armed school resource officer who was on campus, he took a position outside of Building 12, but he never went inside while the shooting was happening. His inaction, as you can imagine, became a huge point of public outrage and led to intense investigations of the immediate police response. But then, out of all this tragedy, all this grief, and anger at the system's failure, something truly remarkable happened. The student survivors, they refused to be silent. They took all that pain and channeled it into one of the most powerful youth-led movements in modern history. And they didn't waste any time. Just days after the shooting, students like David Hogg, X Gonzalez, and Jacqueline Corin founded Never Again MSD. Their mission was simple, and it was crystal clear. Make sure a tragedy like the one they lived through would never, ever happen again. And they were smart about it. They immediately took to social media, using that hashtag #NeverAgain, to build this incredible national movement. They called out politicians, they demanded policy changes like universal background checks, and they organized. The March for Our Lives in Washington, D.C. drew hundreds of thousands of people, becoming one of the largest protests the Capitol had ever seen. So, did all this activism, all this noise actually do anything? Absolutely. The public pressure became so intense that it forced politicians and even major corporations to respond in ways that, frankly, were unthinkable just weeks before. Let's take a look at what actually changed. First up, right in Florida, a Republican-controlled state, a major gun safety bill was passed just 3 weeks after the shooting. Think about that. The act raised the minimum age to buy a rifle to 21, it created a waiting period, and it banned bump stocks. It was a stunning and direct legislative response. But when you looked at the national stage, it was a totally different story. The country basically split right down the same old familiar political lines. Republicans tended to focus on school security. You might remember President Trump's suggestion to arm teachers and mental health. Democrats, on the other hand, really echoed the student activists, calling for stricter gun control laws. That fundamental divide was as deep as ever. And it wasn't just politicians feeling the heat. Big businesses started to respond too. Under pressure from the #NeverAgain movement, major retailers like Dick's Sporting Goods and Walmart actually changed their gun sales policies. And you had dozens of other companies cutting their ties and discount programs with the NRA. So when you step back and look at it all, the Parkland shooting was this horrific tragedy, born from a whole cascade of failures. But it also gave birth to this incredibly resilient and powerful movement that has really fundamentally changed the conversation in America. And that leaves us with one last big question to think about. Years later, how does the legacy of those 17 lives and the survivors who fight in their name continue to shape our world?